Welcome to Valente Brothers TV, once again here from our headquarters in North Miami Beach. We're back for one more episode of our Jiu-Jitsu history segment, episode number 4. Today we're going to talk about the influence of Jigoro Kano, the founder of Kodokan Judo, in the history of Jiu-Jitsu, and his contributions to Judo that are directly connected to the history of Jiu-Jitsu. Professor Pedro.
Jigoro Kano started with a club inside the Tokyo University. Among students, he was a young man.
30 years ago, I have to say that, 30 years ago, Valente Brothers started with a club inside the University of Miami.
Yes.
With Professor Pedro.
So Jigoro Kano, many years before, around 110 years before I started my club at the University of Miami, he had his club at Tokyo University. And last episode we discussed Erwin Baus. Erwin Baus helped him, was instrumental in helping him promote Jiu-Jitsu first at the university, but then Jigoro Kano, a brilliant man, a genius, an educator, he started to help organize Jiu-Jitsu. He was seen by the entire Jiu-Jitsu community in Japan as a leader, and he was very inclusive in his approach. He brought the Jiu-Jitsu masters, the most prominent Jiu-Jitsu masters in Japan at the time, together in meetings where they would jointly discuss the practice of Jiu-Jitsu, better standards for the entire Jiu-Jitsu community, not only to promote a more complete system, because at the time the different schools focused on different areas. He wanted to promote a complete system. Actually, at the time of Jigoro Kano, Jiu-Jitsu had become very focused on grappling, on the ground. And he felt that ground grappling was important, but he didn't feel that it granted a focus that was greater than on the stand-up. He felt that fights started standing up, so practitioners should learn atemiwaza, striking techniques, katamewaza, the techniques on the ground, but that the nagewaza techniques, the throwing techniques, were also very important. And so he wanted to make sure that nagewaza played a more important role in the practice of Jiu-Jitsu.
You mentioned atemiwaza.
Correct.
Yes. And Pedro, let me just go back. I have a question. You mentioned that Jigoro Kano started teaching at the university, right? The Tokyo Imperial University.
He might have taught before in his original school under his teacher. He trained Kitoryu, Tenshin Shinryu, and he was already teaching as an apprentice, but his trajectory also began with his club at the University of Tokyo.
Yeah, and that was my question, because usually those that study the story of Jigoro Kano, it is more common to talk about his first school being the one in the temple.
Correct. The Kodokan, the first Kodokan.
The first Kodokan, a small temple that I had the opportunity to visit when I was in Tokyo. So I just wanted to clarify that.
So, and I believe that, because that's 1882 when the Kodokan is formed, but even before that, Erwin Baus met him at the University of Tokyo, and he was already training and already was trying to promote the art of Jiu-Jitsu under his teachers at the time. He was a student.
It's always hard to precise exactly when the first class was taught, just like when you first taught your first students, your friends, and some football players at the University of Miami.
Yes. No, for sure.
I wish there was an iPhone so that you could have registered that first class, that first student.
That's true. Erwin Baus mentioned that he went to Shiba, and in Shiba he met
Shiba, more to the south of Japan.
Yes, and he met an older Jiu-Jitsu teacher, a master of Jiu-Jitsu, who was together with his son teaching the police in Shiba. The governor of Shiba told him that he really believed that Jiu-Jitsu was a wonderful activity, disappointed that it had really almost disappeared in Japan at this time. And
it was hidden in a small town.
Correct. And Erwin Baus brought this master to Tokyo to do a demonstration at the University of Tokyo. And at the time, Erwin Baus said it's amazing how I thought that Jigoro Kano and his students were so good, but the ones from Shiba came and really dominated them.
And let me challenge our friends, those of you that like the history, research the name of this teacher.
Yes.
Let's not mention it.
Correct.
And his son, the last name, please.
And also the style that they practice, the style of Jiu-Jitsu that they practice.
And please share it with us, with everyone in the comments.
In the comment section. And so Jigoro Kano, that's how he started, but eventually, with time, he established himself as the highest authority to the point that he didn't see Judo as a new and separate art from Jiu-Jitsu. He saw Judo as rebranding, as a new name for Jiu-Jitsu. He said, Jiu-Jitsu was how it was practiced in the past, Judo is how we're going to practice it now.
And Pedro, can I connect
It's the same activity that changed its name, and not a new separate activity.
If I can connect also the name of the teacher that we asked you to research and share with us in the comments, there's a very nice passage in one of the books of Erwin Bell's where he talks about the visit to this school.
It's beautiful.
And how he was instrumental in bringing it back to Japanese society.
And this teacher, I'll give our friends a hint. It starts with the letter T, his last name. This teacher, with tears in his eyes, shows his gratitude and thanks Erwin Bowles for once again reviving. And he tells him, now I feel that I can die in peace knowing that Jiu-Jitsu is going to survive.
Yes.
And he passed a few years later.
And for us, this is very meaningful because Erwin Bowles being a medical doctor and how we were introduced to Jiu-Jitsu, the reason why Jiu-Jitsu is present in 4 generations of the Valente family is because of doctors as well. Right? Our grandfather, our father.
But let's talk about the role of Jigoro Kano and his contributions. He wanted to organize the practice of Jiu-Jitsu. He wanted to standardize the practice of Jiu-Jitsu. He felt that the uniform of practice should be standardized. So he came up with this idea of wearing a keiko gi, a training gi, a training kimono, specific for the practice of his art.
Very similar to what they were in their day-to-day lives.
Correct.
To simulate clothing.
Before, it was exactly the clothing that they wore. In Tenshin Shinryu, they already had some different colors of the jacket to denote rank. But before, it was regular clothing. Jigoro Kano, he came up with a clothing very similar, as you said, but specific clothing for training. That was happening before, but he standardized that in a more organized way. Also, the belt system. He was the first one to denote rank through belt color. He introduced a black belt. The first black belt being the first student of the Kodokan, Tsunejiro Tomita. He was the first black belt ever in any art because the black belt was something that was developed and introduced in martial arts by Jigoro Kano. And also many meetings took place, a famous one in 1906 at the Butokukai in Kyoto, where you also had an opportunity to visit, where there's a famous picture of the masters together, and they were discussing the different rules for competition and how Jiu-Jitsu should be practiced. They were discussing the use of leg locks, different types of leg locks, if they should be allowed, if they shouldn't be allowed, and it wasn't easy. There was a lot of heated debate, but those moments were very important in the establishment of Jiu-Jitsu / Judo in Japan. A lot of people argue, is it Judo, is it Jiu-Jitsu, which one came first? It's important, obviously Jiu-Jitsu came first, but it's important to understand that Jiu-Jitsu and Judo in Japan at this time were seen as synonyms. And also when they traveled when the art traveled to the West, the words Jiu-Jitsu and Judo were used as synonyms to describe the same exact thing.
Good. That's important. Sometimes we see debates on if it was Jiu-Jitsu, if it was Judo, and back then it was just one art that sometimes was referred to as Judo and sometimes was referred to as Jiu-Jitsu.
In next episode, we should talk about the exportation of the art and how very important Japanese emissaries, some from the Kodokan, from Jigoro Kano schools, others from different Jiu-Jitsu schools, traveled to Europe, first to England, but then around Western Europe and eventually around the world, teaching the art of Jiu-Jitsu / Judo, at the time they were synonyms, and the great impact that this had in the world of martial arts and the world of fighting.
Great. So we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.